moving along to our next session. So right now we have some handouts going around. Any extras, slide them to the middle, and we'll go ahead and get going with our next chat. So I would like to introduce, sorry.
He gets choked up when he talks about me, and that's okay.
No, it's a kettle chip from. This is being recorded, so that's going to be fun to see later. I would like to introduce Kate Fint from the Center for Conflict Resolution, where we're going to talk about conflict resolution, which is an important skill you will be doing in your internship and also just beyond in life. It's always good to have these types of trainings. And so without further ado, Kate.
Thank you. All right. So because I know we also have some students floating out in the ether, I am going to do my best to stay tethered to a microphone. That will also mean I will try to be quieter than usual. I am a loud human being. But thank you so much, everybody. I'm really excited to see everybody. I was a PILI myself. So really excited to be here for kind of the orientation, the start of everything for everybody. Like already mentioned, I'm here with the Center for Conflict Resolution. So CCR, for those who aren't familiar, is a 501c3 nonprofit here in downtown Chicago. We actually got started 40 some odd years ago in about 1979. A small group of attorneys in the Young Lawyers section of the Chicago Bar Association noticed that cases were ending up in court that maybe shouldn't be there. You know, and part of that is sometimes people end up in court and it ends up costing more to see the case through the litigation process than was at issue in the first place. A lot of times these were cases where there was a continued relationship. So even if a judge in a robe hands down a verdict for you, you're still going to see this person. You still have to interact with them. And sometimes victory would feel hard won, but cold in the end anyway. You know, maybe you didn't get the apology that you wanted. You didn't get the resolution that you wanted. So they came up with the idea for a neighborhood justice center in uptown Chicago that would provide free mediation services for anyone who needed them. They could be in court currently, they could be not in court currently. And when I say that, I've been in mediation services for a few years now, and we had one not too terribly long ago where two women came into the office and they said, we're not in court or anything, we hate each other, we're sisters, and our mother is ill. She really wants us here for Thanksgiving this year. And we would like to sit down with a neutral mediator to strategize how to sit at a table for 4 hours and not kill each other when there's alcohol involved. And we went, yeah, we can do that, right? So the idea was we want something created where the resolution lies in the hands of the people who are experiencing the conflict. So that was back in 1979. They managed to get some funding. They managed to get the doors open. And that first year, they mediated something like 5 cases. So fast forward to now, we opened a little closer to 2,000 cases last year. We have moved our location downtown to the Loop, actually right around the corner from here. I would say 80 to 85% of the cases that we get are court referred. A lot of these are parenting cases. They're fee disputes between attorneys and their former clients. We take a lot of civil stalking, no contact cases, neighbor disputes. And most importantly, also importantly now, we built up over the pandemic something called the Early Resolution Program, which is in place largely to help folks who are facing eviction or consumer debt. And coming up, we're also going to do a foreclosure mediation training. So this program, with a lot of legal aid partners helping, has fundamentally changed the way that residents of Cook County here in Chicago face eviction, right? So the idea is to give people a little autonomy, a little independence as they go through conflict, okay? I will also say some of my favorite cases, we have a lot of programs with justice-involved youth. So these are a lot of kids who are in the wrong place at the wrong time. They're facing their first offense. And rather than be slipped into the system forever, future trashed, as part of a diversionary program, they are given sort of a to-do list before their record can be expunged. And we are often on that to-do list, is sitting down and having a mediation to figure out how to move forward. So that's just a little bit about what we do. As for me, Like already mentioned, my name is Kate. I'm currently the Assistant Director of the Training Department at the Center for Conflict Resolution. One of the things that we do is train mediators to do our volunteer mediations for us. We also do private trainings for folks who want conflict resolution outside of mediation settings. I started out as a programs manager in our direct mediation services department. So for a few years, I worked directly with folks who were going through mediation. I was the case manager who handled the intake and the mediators themselves. And I got that gig by being a PILI. I went to law school a couple decades later than I might have expected to go back for a post-grad degree and wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was here at Loyola, also not far from here. And litigation wasn't sitting quite right with me. Something didn't feel right. And so I thought I would apply for a PILI internship to see if I could swim around at the other end of the swimming pool and see what felt good there. And I managed to get a spot at the Center for Conflict Resolution. And I thought, oh, this will work. This is fine. So the long game for me was I would just cling tenaciously to their ankles until they eventually offered me a full-time gig, which they did, and now I'm in the training department. So I just want to point out that's part of why I'm really excited that you're all PILIs here, right? Because for some of you, this could be a flash in the pan, see what you like, see what you don't like. That's also helpful to know. And for some of you, this could be the thing that opens the door to the next career move for you. If I'm understanding correctly, we have interns and fellows, is that right? Okay, so who are my PILI interns? Excellent, love it. So I was a PILI intern as well, so I'm really excited that you're getting a chance to kind of do this early on. How about fellows? All right, so if I'm understanding correctly, those of you who are PILI fellows, are some of you getting ready to take the dreaded bar exam fairly soon? I see some nods. Okay, great. So if you want to ask any questions about bar exam stress, you've absolutely got this. But that's something to consider as well, is we're going to be talking about conflict resolution today. And part of what that does is make your interactions easier, more effective, and it makes your life go more smoothly. And when you've got Themis or Barbary breathing down your neck about the number of hours you should be studying today, if you could just shave off some time and have better communication skills, that's more time to study secured transactions, which you never fully understood in the first place, right? Okay. I will also mention before I get started, I get lonely up here and I am not someone who minds being interrupted at all. So if you have a question as we go, please feel free to raise your hand. If you are out there in the ether, feel free to put it in the chat. I don't know if you unmute, if I'll be able to hear you. I assume someone is monitoring, but someone kick me in the shins if there's a question from the Zoom chat. Sound okay? Yeah? Excellent. Please keep me company. I talk forever and ever, and then before we know it, it's midnight and we have to order pizza. So just a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. Effective communication skills. So like already mentioned, this is something that is cross-applicable. There is no place that it's a bad idea to have better communication skills, right? So for those of you who are going to be in a position this summer where you have a supervising attorney maybe that you see once a week, once every other week, every day, right? The more you can have those interactions go smoothly, the more you can figure out what they want from you and what you need to do for them, the better that will go for you. If you are in a client-facing position, very often in public interest law, you are really dealing with people, good people, on their worst day, right? So if you can polish up some of these skills to try to make a softer landing, to really understand what it is that they're going through, make sure that they feel heard and validated, you're going to get what you need and they're going to be less traumatized for it, okay? And it makes you a better roommate and friend and partner and neighbor. I would have been a better roommate these many years ago if I had had some of these skills before we got started. Okay. Anybody have questions before I ramble on? No? Okay. So the skills that we're going to broadly be talking about today, and again, we're just kind of skipping the stone over the lake. So if you have questions, if you want to dig into anything, please let me know, are going to be active listening, which is something that is an extremely valuable skill and people will like you better if you're good at it. Effective questioning, those of you getting ready for depositions of any kind, this is not what we're talking about, but always good to consider. Summarizing and reflective listening. Summarizing is an incredibly crucial skill to have. And working on emotions. I want to be very clear, you're not anyone's therapist in your role probably this summer, but these can be some emotional situations. And if you can recognize the smoke coming from those fires, both in yourself and in whoever you're dealing with, you can more effectively navigate around them. Okay? Crickets. Let's talk about active listening first. Okay, so just shout out a couple. How do you demonstrate, first of all, actually, can somebody tell me what they think active listening might be as opposed to just listening? Yeah.
Interacting back with the person who's talking to you, body language, when it comes time, actually having responsive questions to what they've said to you, following up, making sure that you're understanding what they're saying,
Yeah.
making sure that you're a participant in the conversation, even though you aren't necessarily talking.
Yeah, so I'm hearing you're a participant in the conversation, you're responding to what's being said, you've got the body language that says I'm here for this. Yeah. Anybody else? Anything else for active listening? Yeah.
Listening to understand, not listening to respond.
Yeah, listening to understand, not just to respond. You're not sort of waiting and going BS. Okay, it's my turn to talk, right? We're there to listen. Yeah.
Kind of going off of that, also looking at just what their body language is, kind of how they're saying certain things, whether their arms are open or if they choose to cross them.
Yeah.
Seeing all the other things they're saying besides what they are actually doing.
Yeah, so part of being a participant in the conversation is reading their body language as well, kind of read the room, right? Seeing how they're showing up to the conversation. Absolutely. Okay, so it's kind of a quiet room. I'm gonna ask a favor. Is anyone willing to talk to me for a minute? Yes, okay, so what I'm gonna have you do, just for a minute or so here, I'm gonna have you tell me a story. I don't wanna ask you to air all your dirty laundry in front of everyone. So it can be something that's going on at home that you wanna talk about. It can be how you decided to go to law school, whatever you wanna tell me.
Well, yesterday I biked to work for the first time, and it was really great. I had, except when I got there, the building manager, she could see me struggling with my bike, which had my bag on it. And then after I got in the lobby, she was like, "You can't have a bike here," and I was very surprised by that. And so it turns out I have to go back to the building through the docks, which is weird. And that's the exciting thing that happened to me this
Yeah,
time.
no, I'm listening. Okay, I'm gonna pause you for a second. That may have been the end of that story, so you can start a new one. Please talk to me some more.
Yesterday also, very exciting banner day in my house. My cat had a health emergency.
Oh my gosh.
She's okay now, but she's got, but she's very old and she's got this open wound on her back right now that's gonna get better. She's on antibiotics.
Okay.
But she's on pain meds, so she's doing really great. Like she's on the good stuff.
Okay. I'm glad she's enjoying her time. What's your cat's name?
Twinkle.
What?
Twinkle.
Twinkle. Yes, love it. Very serious and imposing name.
Yes. She's a very serious and imposing cat.
Okay, so I'm gonna pause right here. So I talked to you twice. What did it feel like, the first half versus the second half?
I felt like I wasn't keeping your attention the first time. And the second half was very affirming and nice.
Okay. So for that first half where you felt like you didn't have my attention, what was your impulse with the story? I kind of heard you faltering and stopping for a moment and I thought, I'm so sorry, you're gonna hate me. But what effect did that have on you?
I wanted to clam up.
Yeah, right? Wanted to clam up. Just if somebody's not listening, why am I talking? How about the second half?
I wanted to tell you more about this big event in my week that happened.
Yeah, right? It feels a little better. Also, I really hope Twinkle is okay.
She's doing fantastic.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, it sounds like maybe an abscess on the back.
Yeah, with no idea how it started, but she's been very lethargic the last week or so, but now she's doing fantastic.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it. So to ask a sort of blindingly obvious question, but just to bring the rest of the room into our happy hour chat over here, did you notice a difference between half A and half B? Yeah? Was it like kind of being on the outside of that? First half. Yeah.
I felt like secondhand anxiety for her.
It's so cringy, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I could hear her faltering and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm glad it's not me.
Yeah, it's the worst. Anybody else? Second half, more willing to be friends with me? Some assorted nods? Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of behaviors, and I know you covered a bunch of them, but what specific behaviors did you see in the second half where I was not terrible, Kate? Yeah,
You asked questions.
yeah, asking questions,
Eye contact.
eye contact, love it.
You like body language or like kind of pitched forward?
Yeah, body language.
You didn't have to say I'm listening because it was clear that you were listening.
Yeah, I didn't have to say, yeah, I'm here, I'm listening. Mhm. You have my full attention. Yeah, anybody else? That pretty much covers it, right? You've done the slide for me, which is good because this one is wall-to-wall text. But there are some things that you can do to demonstrate good active listening, and some of them are pretty intuitive. These are the things that you already think about. When you are talking to someone and really being present in the conversation in the moment, using appropriate eye contact, and I say appropriate because culturally, it's not always great to do the really sort of laser stare unbroken, but to the comfort level of the folks in front of you, actually being there and saying, I'm gonna look at you instead of staring at my phone, being aware of your body posture. Several people said body language, right? There's a really big difference between me saying, tell me everything immediately, I'm sorry, you're 100 feet away, and being checked out, legs crossed, slumped over the phone, that kind of thing. Removing distractions, we can't always put our phones away. But the more you can sort of not be candy crushing at that moment, the better. Being non-judgmental about what's said, keeping your face and your body and your responses pretty open. Because again, often in our particular roles with PILI, you're dealing with people who are going through something, right? So the idea that you are a place that is going to be the least terrible part of their day. You're just here to listen. You're not here to make any judgments. Showing some interest, asking relevant, clarifying questions only when needed, right? You don't have to turn this into a big thing, but just a couple of little, things to kind of keep the conversation bobbing along. Acknowledging what you've heard them say and what emotions they're expressing. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later, but there are ways to kind of, acknowledge the elephant in the room there. Using minimal encouragers, so that could be something like right? And you don't want to do a creepy amount of that, but just putting in some little things, especially if you're on Zoom. I don't know if anyone will be working remotely at all, but it's nice to let folks know that you haven't frozen and that your internet connection isn't unstable with just a little here and there. And effective use of silence. Silence is something that, for me, can be pretty uncomfortable, but when we train our mediators, that's one of the things that we train on, is that there are moments that it's really helpful to just kind of be quiet. So that's just a little bit to think of for active listening. And again, this fits in every lane. If you are dealing with a supervising attorney, a boss, someone like that, being a good listener is going to make them want to check in with you more often. If you're doing something client-facing, just the slightest move can just topple the Jenga tower, right? So if you can start things off with, you have my attention. I am here to listen to what you have to say. They won't want to shut down. And if you're needing information, that impulse that you had in the first half to shut it down isn't going to happen as fast, right? You won't be part of that. Any questions about active listening or PILI or Netflix? Okay. So let's talk about something else, effective questions. So this is one of my favorites. When it comes to asking questions, can anyone give me a reason that effective questioning might be a better idea? How about if you're dealing with a boss? Yeah.
Effective questions encourage conversation rather than like a yes or no answer.
Yeah.
They often encourage their viewpoint.
Yeah, right? Encourage their viewpoints, try to get to what you're looking for. If you're dealing with somebody, your time is valuable. Nobody has oceans of time. Your boss may not, the client you're dealing with may not. And if you fumble around asking a lot of questions that don't get you where you need to go, you could shut down the conversation. You can miss the information that you were sent to get in the first place. Or, if you're dealing with someone who has 4.5 minutes and, let's get to your question, the better you can be about getting to what you need, the easier your day is going to become, right? So just very broadly, I'm going to separate questions into 2 lanes. And again, this is pretty intuitive. This is not something that no one has been introduced to before, but something to keep in mind are the idea of open and closed questions. So open questions, like you sort of mentioned here, right? This is a way to sort of encourage conversation. Open questions are traditionally the kind of questions where the person answering is going to get to decide what they want to tell you. And these questions often would not fit within the character limit of a tweet, right? So open questions often, but don't always, begin with something like what, why, or how. You know, what was your experience growing up? Why did you choose to go to law school? You know, how are you feeling about the exam you have to take at the end of the week? Tell me about, I didn't put that on there because it's not a question, but it is kind of, right? Tell me about this. I'm opening the floor up to you. With open questions, you are starting the wheel rolling and off it goes on its own. Again, your listener can sometimes take the kind of question you intended and they can make it into the kind of question they want to answer. So you may ask an open question and get a closed answer, particularly if you're dealing with teenagers. But open questions, that's where you're going to really open up for a broad answer. Closed questions, flip that. Closed questions can often be answered with a yes or a no. These are the ones where instead of the wheel rolling, it's a square wheel. You know, it will go exactly this far, no further. So with closed questions, they always, sometimes, but don't always, begin with things like is, do, would, could, was, have, you know. Is there ketchup in the picnic basket? What time did you arrive at the restaurant? You know, do you want to go to the beach this weekend? Right? If you can answer this with something very curt, that's going to be more of a closed question. So closed questions, certainly there is a place for. Neither of these are wrong. You just want to be judicious about when you use which kinds. Does that make sense in terms of open and closed questions? Again, I'm not introducing the wildest concept, right? So just a couple of examples, something to think about. Did you have a good day? Is this an open or closed question?
Close.
Closed, yeah. And again, someone could hear that and say, no, and let me tell you why. Because first of all, the CTA absolutely ruined my life this morning. I can make this into an open question if I want to, but technically, I've asked you something that has a yes or no answer. If I wanted this to be an open question, how would I switch it?
How was your day?
How was your day, right? And then again, the teenager would say, fine. And they've answered with a closed answer regardless. But again, you're trying to get a certain kind of answer. How about what was your understanding of the situation? Yeah, I saw an open, absolutely right. So you can tell me whatever you want. What was your understanding of the situation? Let's have it. I won't ask you to flip that because you don't know anything about the situation, but if you were looking for something specific, you know, you could ask something very specific about the situation, get right to what you want. Do you have an Instagram account? Closed, right? I mean, you could say, yes, I have one and my dog has one and my parakeet has one. And you could go on and on, but that's a yes or no. How would you flip that to an open question?
What are your feelings on social media?
Yeah, that'll work. Tell me about your social media. How many things are you on and where can I follow you? Anything like that where you're casting a wider net. Would you recommend our services? Thoughts? Open, closed? Closed. It's a little trickier, right? Because that's the kind of thing where someone might run away with it. But if you were planning, you know, a survey, something like that, this is the kind of thing that might yield a yes or no, as opposed to something like, you know, tell us about your experience with us. Something like that that might invite a broader answer. What time was it when this happened?
Closed.
Closed, exactly right. I'm looking for something very specific. And again, that makes sense. That's a moment that you would want a closed question. You know, if I want to know where you live, I wouldn't say, describe your apartment building in relation to the buildings around it and how close it may be to water. I'm going to say, what's your address, right? So if you need to know what time something happened, great. Okay? Questions about open and closed questions and how to swap them about. Because I'm going to have you play with it in a second. Silence. I love it. That is the silence of full understanding. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna give myself and my poor vocal cords just a moment to relax, and I'm gonna have kind of a partner activity. Are we close enough that we can kind of pair up? I don't wanna have to number people off. Can everybody find a pair? And for those of you floating out in internet land, I think we are likely not going to do breakout rooms for this. It's just gonna be a very quick exercise for a couple minutes. So feel free to pet the cat and run around and do jumping jacks or think about how you might do this. Okay, so everyone find a partner. Do we have partners? Yes? Wail piteously if you don't have one. Okay. And once you have your partners, have a look back up here and I'll give you some instructions. Are we relatively settled in pairs? Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. So in your partners, I'm gonna choose, you're gonna self-select. One of you will be blue and one of you will be red. So the person who's gonna be blue, raise a tiny hand. So your partner knows, you know, everyone knows. So the other one is red. There you go. This is not political affiliations, I swear to Pete. Okay. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna get a little timer here. So we're gonna start, blue, you're gonna go first, okay? And I'm going to give you 1 minute. And I want you to get to know your partner as well as you can, asking only closed questions. Blue, you are getting 1 minute to interview red. You can only ask closed questions, get to know them. Does that make sense? Does anyone have questions about what we're doing? Closed questions only. I'll hear it if you cheat. Okay. With that said then, Blue, I'm gonna give you about a minute, starting now. Go ahead and ask closed questions of your partners and get to know each other. This time I'm gonna have you stop asking questions. Time's up, Blue. You know everything that you need to about your partner. You've asked only closed questions. So now, for the next minute or so, we're gonna switch it up. And Red, I'm going to have you ask Blue only open-ended questions for the next minute or so. So you're gonna ask only open-ended questions, so help me, I will hear it. I will hear it if there's a closed-ended question. And you have 1 minute or so to get to know your Blue partner, open-ended questions only. Whenever you're ready.
Like, how are you feeling about the first year model? That's probably better.
excellent. It sounds like there were some good conversations happening, and I desperately really did want to walk around and listen to everything, not to see if everyone was cheating, but just because I want to know what's going on. So first things first, those of you asking closed questions, roughly how many questions would you say you asked in your minute and 20 that I gave you? 15 or 20 questions? I see some nodding. Bunch of questions? Okay. Those of you asking open-ended questions, roughly how many questions did you ask? 2. I see a 2. 3. 3, yeah? 5, you got to 5? Love it. Okay, so just one thing I do want to kind of point out there. So how did that feel for asking the closed-ended questions? Those of you who were asking 15 and 20 questions, yeah.
It was frustrating because I wanted to ask more questions, but I would get more information, but formatting it as only closed questions, it was very limited.
Yeah, so it felt limited, it was frustrating, you wanted more info, but you were like, ugh, roll. Anybody else? How do you feel? Yeah,
It was hard to feel natural and like the conversation was.
didn't feel natural? Yeah? How about you?
Yeah, it felt less like a conversation and more like an interrogation.
Yeah, felt less like a conversation and more like an interrogation. Everybody else feel something along those lines? How did it feel being asked only closed-ended questions? Feel free to shout it out.
Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable? What was uncomfortable about it?
Just didn't feel natural.
Didn't feel natural. Okay. Anybody else? How did it feel?
Kind of feels like you've done something wrong or just trying to get.
Feels like you've done something wrong, right? You're like, I didn't steal the cookies. Kate said no cheating. Okay. How about open-ended questions? How did it feel being the asker of the open-ended questions? Yeah?
In general, good, but then there were sometimes moments where I wanted to know like something specific of like, oh, you did this thing, that's really cool. When? Or like
Yes.
where? Or, then I couldn't ask those questions.
Yes, I did restrict you in that way. So it felt good in general, but then if you wanted to know something else, you're sort of going, okay, what sentence grammar gymnastics can I go through to make my follow-up open-ended? My God. Anybody else? Yeah?
I thought it was also interesting because they were open-ended questions, I didn't necessarily know what type of information I was looking for, like what I should ask as much. Whereas I think like when I was being asked the closed-ended questions, like it was very clear that there was very specific information that the other person was trying to get from me. But I didn't necessarily know what information I was trying to get when I was asking more open-ended questions.
Yeah, so it was a broader net for you. You thought, I don't really know what I'm fishing for here, but sure, I'll just let this information roll in, as opposed to being asked the closed-ended questions where you thought, oh, they're going for something. They want to know something, or I'm in trouble, right? I've done something wrong. Yeah. How about being asked the open-ended questions? How did that feel for those of you who were in that seat? Yeah.
It like opened up the door to like just like more natural conversation.
Yeah, open the door, felt like more conversation. I'm seeing some nods. Kind of the same vibe? Okay. So I do want to point out, these are both good tools to have. And, for those of you who were relegated to asking only open questions, probably really wished you could follow up with some closed-ended, and vice versa, right? So just a couple of sort of takeaways that I've been hearing. I knew this brilliant group would kind of match exactly what I had on the slide. In terms of the impact that you're going to see with this kind of question, in general, open-ended questions will get you more information. It can really build some rapport with the person that you're dealing with, right? They feel less like they're in trouble and more like you want to know. Creates a little more of a flow, and it's much more focused on the person who is answering the question. If you ask me an open-ended question, I can be selective about what I'm in the mood to tell you. If you say, Kate, tell me about your childhood. Well, I have several things to choose from, right? So I can pick what I am comfortable sharing with you. Closed-ended questions, you may get less information, but it's going to be more particular. If you're looking for something very specific, a closed-ended question is the way to do it. It can feel like an interrogation. Nailed that, you two, right? It can feel much more like an interview. I am asking you this, you answer that, that's it. So it can feel a little choppier, a little more stunted. And it's much more focused on me. I'm asking you the questions. This is the information that I need from you. So again, sometimes you do need specific information. If I'm doing intake with a client and I need to know something from them, I'm going to ask them that specific question. And if they choose to tack more on, that's okay. For those of you who may have done some version of trial ad at some point, right? When you have someone on the stand, right? If it's my witness, I'm gonna go open-ended questions. They can tell me whatever they want. You know, if this is a hostile witness, I'm gonna go more closed-ended questions. I wanna keep a tighter rein on what I am asking. Generally, what you're looking for is, this is the worst graphic and I apologize for it, but it's a good notion, generally. What you really wanna do in a lot of situations is start broad and then narrow down. It's what your instinct was. I'm gonna ask something very general, tell me about your childhood, right? And then when I hear things that I'm listening for, I can follow up with something a little more particularized. So if you can start broad and then narrow down, that tends to be a more effective way to do things. Also, something to keep in mind, the questions that are asked often will tell you something about the person asking them, right? Sometimes the question someone asks me tells me more about them than I'm going to reveal about myself. So if someone said, if I asked you, did you grow up in a two-parent household? What could you probably guess about me? That I didn't, right? If I ask something like, did you go to a co-ed high school? Yes, right? But that there is some inference on the part of the listener that the person asking that question maybe comes from that perspective. This actually happened recently with one of our newer early resolution program case managers who's not here, so they won't care that I told the story. We were on a Zoom together and one of my colleagues has adopted this kitten. And I mean, this is like a 4-month-old, like there are bulb patches on it. You can see his head through the fur still. It's a tiny, tiny kitten. And the new case manager said, oh, he's really cute. Will he get bigger? Okay, so not a cat person is what I'm hearing from you. Totally a fine question for dogs, right? Your teacup chihuahua versus your Bernese Mountain Dog. This one's gonna stop about here and the other one gets significantly larger, but cats are kind of cat-sized, right? For the most part with some breeds. So if someone looks at a kitten that could fit in a contact lens container and says, aw, will he get bigger? This is someone who didn't grow up with cats, right? So just something to keep in mind when you are the recipient of questions, that sometimes that will tell you a bit about the person across the table as well. Questions about questions. How very meta of me. All right, if I'm missing hands or inquisitive faces, please shout it out. So next up on our dreaded list is summarizing. So when I refer to summarizing, and I hear some handouts turning, everybody does have a handout. You're free to take notes on it. We've put some places to kind of jot things down since you don't have the benefit of computers right in front of you. That can be your dream journal for later. I'm not collecting anything, so write absolutely whatever you want on it. But when we talk about summarizing, essentially, you are saying a bunch of things to me, and I'm gonna summarize them back. Why? Yeah.
To see if you got their point.
Yeah, to see if I got their point. Yeah, absolutely. Why else? Yeah.
It shows that you're actively listening.
Shows that I'm listening, right? It's nice to hear that back sometimes. Anybody else? Yeah.
Remind them of the next step.
Yeah.
In their own narrative.
Remind them of the next step. Absolutely. Yeah. Another
See
one.
if you missed anything.
See if you've missed anything. Very frequently. My days are Swiss cheese sometimes. I miss a ton. This is a good way to ensure that I'm not. Yeah, really good point. Summarizing, I will say, is a skill that we really drill into our mediators, but I think it's pretty cross-applicable. I did see a comic that I really enjoyed recently where there's a client and an attorney standing in front of the bench in front of a judge. And the client is saying to the judge, Your Honor, I want a new lawyer. I'm paying this guy $1 bazillion an hour, and all he does is just repeat back to me everything that I've said. And the judge is leaning forward and saying, so what I'm hearing you say, and I was like, yep, that'll work. It's real niche, but it's just for us. So So you're absolutely right. Summarizing in whatever form you are summarizing can serve a number of purposes. It can really focus people. If you've got someone in front of you, particularly if you're client facing and you have someone in front of you in crisis, I don't know about you, my brain isn't always firing on all cylinders when I'm upset about something. So if you have someone who is just all over the map with what they're trying to tell you, sometimes summarizing back can sort of serve to focus them, right? Okay, so what I'm hearing from you is this, and we're going to focus them on triage-wise, what needs to be dealt with at that particular moment. And just like you said, it makes people feel heard. You know, if I am not sure about this whole legal aid thing and I'm coming in and someone blows me off or misses it or doesn't understand what I'm really talking about, then, you know, I'm going to stop seeking that service. So it's a really good way to make sure that people feel heard. Same goes with your coworkers and your roommates and your partners and your friends. If you're able to sort of summarize back, it means you were listening. It builds trust. And often this is a profession where we start with no credit in the bank for trust, right? You've got to start from zero with that. So if you can do something that's an easy fix to just make somebody trust you a little bit, I'm a human being in front of you, that'll make the road a little smoother. Builds rapport with folks, particularly if you're going to need to work with them on a continuing basis. And like you said, check for understanding. Did I miss something? Super possible that I did. Sometimes my brain fills in gaps in ways that I wish that it wouldn't. And I think that's part of how we're built. You know, we are designed to fill in gaps, to make assumptions, because that's what keeps me from stepping out into a crosswalk or trusting the wrong person. We do these shortcuts. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, absolutely. But maybe you don't. So this is a great way to check your own understanding, kind of review where we are. If this is a long and laborious process, this is a good way to say, okay, so this is what we've covered so far. Questions about that? Am I getting this right? Is there anything else you'd like to add, right? And pulling together different pieces of information. So a little bit like focusing the people that you're talking to. We have parties written on here because that's what we have in mediation. A lot of times that's what you have in legal services as well. But any human being or group of human beings in front of you, this is a good way to sort of tie together pieces of information, do a summary that sort of reflects your own understanding and gets us where we need to go next. Any questions about any of this list? Anything you want to add to it? Okay. So when I train mediators, we refer to summarizing, and we have sort of 3 lanes of it. So I'm just going to touch on these very briefly. This is not a perfectly separate Venn diagram. Life is messier than that. So there are times that you're going to be doing a little column A, a little column B, but just something to kind of be aware of. We have restatement, reflection, and grand summaries. So restatement is very much, I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to hand you back 80% of what you said to me. I'm probably not going to sand the edges down. I'm just going to, I'll date myself and say dragnet, just the facts, ma'am, right? So restatement is paraphrasing a little bit in your own words, but if you told me everything about your cat and then I said, okay, so what I'm hearing from you is that it's been a really hard week. She has an abscess on her back. She's on antibiotics right now. She's an older cat, but she's on the good stuff. And so you're feeling a lot better about it. Did I miss anything?
No.
Right, so I didn't add my own twist to anything. I was just sort of saying, this is what I heard you say. Did I get it? And if I missed something huge, if I said, so your pet iguana has an abscess on his back, and that's a bummer, and he's on some medicine now, everything's okay, this would be an excellent moment to be like, I hate lizards, definitely it was a cat I was talking about, listen more carefully. Reflection is a little bit more nuanced. Reflection is a way of summarizing, but it's not repeating someone's words back. It's a little bit more like holding up a mirror to them, right? So this is reflecting emotions back. So if I got the whole story about the cat and the week and this craziness and how it's been, rather than repeating back 80% of that story and saying, did I miss any facts? This is important for our intake process. I might say, it sounds like that was really stressful on top of your week, right? So it's, whatever it is that you're seeing, you're just sort of holding up a mirror and saying, it looks like this is pretty exasperating for you. Sounds like you're feeling really suffocated by this, right? So, and people, as a general rule, will tell you if you get that wrong, right? But the idea of reflecting someone's emotions back to them is going to tie a lot into our next section as well. But this is a good way to acknowledge the person in front of you, makes them feel heard and valued. And then finally, just briefly, is grand summary. Again, if any of you ever choose to come and become mediators with me, join me. Grand summaries are really important, particularly when you want to keep a progress moving forward, right? So we don't need to go back and do the whole play-by-play, particularly if you have people who are at an 11 about things. So I'm not going to remind you about the 87 points that you're very upset about. A grand summary is more like pulling out the common themes. Hey, so, it sounds like with the two of you, I'm hearing a lot of mutual frustration, but you really both want to get this resolved without going to court. You're both concerned about a payment plan. You want this, you want that, but very broad, because if you take people all the way back to that beginning point, they're going to retreat into their positions and you're not going to make any progress. So the idea of a grand summary can be really helpful if we need to get this sorted and move forward and still have our lunch hour, right? So grand summaries, a little more nuanced, probably more often what people will be using are restatement and reflection, okay? Questions about summarizing? No? Okay. Again, that's a skill that it's hard to think of questions on the fly for that. It's just something to sort of practice. Okay. So I've been droning on endlessly about active listening, summarizing, reflecting things back. So I'm going to tell a little story. First, what is your name?
Isabel?
Isabel? Okay. Excellent. What's your name?
Alex?
Alex? Okay. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a story. On Thursday, I came out of the apartment at 7:30 to head out for work, and I was rushing so as to be on time. At the bottom of the stairs, I tripped over an umbrella left by Alex, who didn't want a wet umbrella in her apartment. And because of it, I twisted my ankle, I hurt my hand pretty badly, and I messed up my hair. Luckily, when I pulled myself together, my carpool was still waiting. When I got to work, I had a really hard time typing, and I got in trouble with my boss. I brought my friend Isabel today, who was there and saw all the injuries, as a witness. The next day, I went to see my lawyer, Ms. Silver, at 1358 Broadway, who said I could sue Alex. I called Alex to work it out, but she hung up on me. Okay. Woe is me. I didn't say it was the most interesting story, but this is a story that I brought to you. Couple of questions. Did I get to work on time?
Yeah.
I'm seeing some nods. Okay. How do we know?
Your carpool was still waiting for you.
My carpool was still waiting for me. That is true. When I pulled myself together after the fall, my carpool was still waiting.
And you didn't say you were late. If it made an issue for you, you would have said, I was late to work.
Sure. So I'm hearing, I didn't say I was late. If that had been an issue, I probably would have brought it up. So technically we don't know. Sounds like I probably got there on time. My carpool was still waiting. I didn't complain about being late. I did say I got in trouble with my boss, but I didn't say it was because I was late. Okay, so we don't know, but we have a guess. Name one person in my carpool. I'm seeing some shaking heads. Yeah?
Can we infer that Isabel was there in the carpool because she saw everything happen?
So the question was, can we infer that Isabel was there? Maybe. I mean, what I said is I brought my friend Isabel today who was there and saw all the injuries as a witness. So I have a witness. We don't technically know if Isabel was in my carpool. Might have been. I'm good to ride in a carpool with. What injuries did I sustain?
I see hair.
What?
Your hair got just.
Yes, that's an injury. I had a bad hair day. I messed up my hair. That's one. Yeah.
You twisted your ankle.
I twisted my ankle. I absolutely did. Thank you. Thank you. I feel seen.
You hurt your hand.
I hurt my hand, absolutely. I twisted my ankle, I hurt my hand pretty badly, and I messed up my hair. Don't anyone dare say that is not an injury, it 100% is.
Yes, it is.
Whose umbrella did I trip over? Are we sure?
Alex had control over something.
Hello, law students. Alex had control of the umbrella. So we're gonna be talking about liability issues. Okay. Yeah, technically, we don't know. Alex did have control of the umbrella. What we know is that the umbrella was outside of Alex's apartment because we didn't want a wet umbrella in the apartment. Could have been a guest. The liability of whether you are responsible for your guest behavior, that's not this class. Welcome to torts, everyone. Okay, so we don't technically know, but we have a pretty good guess, right? We know who to call first for it anyway. What type of job do I have?
Desk job?
What?
A desk job?
Maybe a desk job? Maybe, yeah.
A typing job?
Something that involves typing, right? Desk job, something clerical, but we don't technically know. We just know I have a boss and I got in trouble and I had trouble typing. Yeah, okay, so again, you can make some guesses, but you don't technically know. How did Alex feel when I called? Now we're catching on. I'm seeing some shaking heads. Are the shaking heads, I declined to answer on the grounds of, yes, hello?
We don't really know.
We don't really know.
You just said that they hung up.
Yes, they hung up on me, right? But could have been going through a tunnel. Could have dropped your phone in a puddle because there were umbrellas involved. It's apparently a rainy spell. Yeah, absolutely. But we don't technically know. We can guess. Generally, I don't hang right up on people if I'm in a great mood, but we don't know. Last question. What time did I leave my apartment? 7:30. AM or PM? We don't know. I love it. Okay. The inference, right, the sort of mini assumption is probably AM, right? My brain goes right to AM because there was a carpool waiting, it's 7:30, you're doing something where you're typing, you did your hair, it's probably a day job, right? But we don't know. So part of the thing to be aware of is we make assumptions. And again, those assumptions are often what protect you from sharp objects and fast cars and bad people, right? It is my assumption that keeps me from touching the stove or the coffee pot when it starts to do the whistling, steaming thing for my pour over. Sometimes assumptions are a good idea, but when you are looking for information, when you are in an active listening conversation, you want to check those assumptions. Typically what we tell our mediators is, if you're not sure, ask. If you think you know, ask anyway. Right? And so that can be a great time for those smaller follow-up questions. You mentioned that you had Isabel there. Was Isabel in your carpool? What time did you said you left at 7:30? Was that AM or PM? Right? Just to confirm your own understanding. So again, if you're in a position where you're getting instructions from a supervisor, you want to ask for clarity if you're not sure. And if you're doing some sort of intake or client services, just make sure that your own perspective, did you go to a co-ed high school, or your own assumptions aren't getting in the way of someone else's actual story, okay? Questions about that, my delightful, amazing listeners? Okay, well, I'm gonna take my twisted ankle and my hurt hand and my messed up hair, and we're gonna talk just a little bit in our last few minutes about emotions. So, the first sort of broad question is, why should we care about emotions? This not being a master's in social work or other therapeutic program. Why do we care? I swear I'm not hiding the ball. Yeah,
Because we're dealing with real people in often very emotional situations.
yeah, dealing with real people in often emotional situations. Yeah,
I also think because a lot of people lead, especially in crisis situations, lead from a place of emotions. And if we can understand their emotions, then you can understand the result that they're trying to seek or where they're coming from.
yeah, people lead with emotions and you're trying to understand where they're coming from. Yeah,
Also, it helps to, I would say, to manage their emotions if you understand where their emotions are, where you want to get them to be.
yeah,
We often interpret anger we often interpret like a bad situation as anger, but it could be hurt, it could be confused, it could be a lot of other things.
Yeah.
And how you get them from that set of emotions to where you want them to be is very different.
Yeah, absolutely. So some for managing emotions and also kind of understanding under the broad umbrella if you seem angry, there's a lot that lives within there, right? Did I see a hand up back here? Yeah?
Yeah, understanding emotions is important in its own right, in terms of satiating everybody's emotional needs, but they're also instrumentally valuable in terms of solving substantive issues that are attendant to emotions that arise. So I think it's important to recognize that emotions also have to deal with substantive matters, not are like it's something exclusively relegated to like the emotional domain.
Yeah, absolutely, because you can't separate them, right? We have the substantive issues, whatever's really at hand here, and then the emotions arise. They're sometimes ancillary, they're sometimes part of it, but we don't get to shut those off, and you're dealing with people at all times who are gonna have some emotions, and you are as well, and sometimes recognizing that in yourself can also help you get around a difficult situation. So these are all really great answers. Sort of broadly, we say we like to acknowledge, it's sort of a two-step thing, acknowledge and explore emotions. So acknowledging them really helps to diffuse the resistance attached to the emotion and help remove obstacles to the conversation. So in any given conversation, if you're talking about a hard thing, that should be enough. That's the hard part, right? So if you can remove anything that's going to make it crunchier, you can take out any of those sharp edges. Sometimes just acknowledging an emotion, there's a clinical psychiatrist out there named Dan Siegel who talks a lot about name it to tame it, which is, kind of trite and glib and easy to remember. But there is this notion that just by naming and acknowledging an emotion, there is something that sort of brings you back up into your prefrontal cortex so you're more able to participate. Remember, in any given conversation, you're trying to get somebody to communicate with you or to listen to you, right? And part of what's important about that, I'm not gonna let this go into a whole neurochem thing, I swear, but the human brain is fascinating. So we have sort of very broadly speaking, an upstairs and a basement, right? There's your limbic system where you've got your hypothalamus, your animal emotion sort of survival complex. The amygdala lives down there. And then upstairs in the prefrontal cortex, this is where we're doing our taxes. This is where you're going to make those rational decisions. And the human brain has evolved perhaps somewhat more slowly than other parts. Sorry, brain. So what that means is back in the days of really needing to survive, the basement of our brains was given permission to unplug the prefrontal cortex. Because if something is leaping at me with teeth and fangs and lots of fur, I can't stop and consider it. I need to go. This is the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn impulse. And so we have this evolutionarily designed unplug button where the basement's in charge. No rational decisions are made at that moment. Unfortunately, as life has gotten more nuanced and complicated, that part of our brain hasn't necessarily changed. So sometimes the basement of my brain regards a tiger jumping at me exactly the same as someone telling me that low-rise jeans are making a comeback, right? I suddenly feel threatened and it unplugs the upper reaches of my brain, and now I can't meaningfully contribute to this conversation until my cortisol levels have receded. So there is a great deal to be said for that name it to tame it. If you can keep someone from flipping their lid, we can keep the conversation in a much calmer and more rational place. And exploring those emotions will get you to underlying needs and interests. And this is something that we work really hard in our mediation process. Needs and interests, very broadly, is why you want what you want. So I come to you with a position. I am suing for $1,000. I want the window closed. That's my position. There's one way to get that. Either I get it or I don't. I win or I lose. My $1,000, the window closed. But why I want what I want takes us out of the binary. Maybe I want the window closed because I'm the girl who's always cold and I'm freezing. Maybe I want it closed because I have terrible allergies and this is a rough time for that. Maybe there are bugs and they're coming in and biting me, or I can't be muted on this Zoom meeting, so I need quiet and the sirens are going by. Now that we know why I want what I want, we can talk about getting me a space heater or some bug spray or having it closed during the Zoom meeting and then open the rest of the time, right? So there is something about exploring those emotions when you see them, because as a general rule, and I certainly won't speak for all of you, I don't get upset about things I don't care about. So if you're trying to get to what's important to me, what my underlying needs and interests are, if you see an emotion, that's sort of smoke to the fire, right? Any questions about that? That was the world's fastest primer on emotions. I'm going to buzz through a couple of phrases that you can use. Questions? Don't say anything about low-rise jeans. Okay. So in terms of recognizing an emotion, I feel like we've already been talking about this. I'm hearing this from all of you already. There are some things you can look out for, right? Smoke to that flame. So if you start hearing someone, if you're dealing with a client and they're repeating the same thing over and over, that may be that they're getting increasingly upset that you haven't heard or acknowledged what they're talking about. So just taking a moment to say, I've heard you say this a number of times. What about it am I not understanding? Talk to me about this, right? Because if someone's just kind of caught in that death spiral, we're not going to get any progress made. So if you're starting to see someone repeat themselves, if you hear a change in tone of voice, and that can be volume as well. Some people get very loud when they're upset. Some people get very quiet. So it's going to be a question of your own instinct, your own interpersonal communication skills. But if you see a change that feels anomalous, there may be something to that. The pacing of the words, some people when they get upset, they talk very, very quickly, 75 words a minute, 90 words a minute, right? So taking a moment to sort of slow that down, let them know that you're listening. Keeping an eye on their face. This has come up with the active listening as well. You've got to read the room. And if somebody changes their posture, if you are on Zoom or in person and you see someone get closed off in some way, that may be something to make sure that you have an understanding of what's going on with them, okay? In terms of acknowledging an emotion, again, you are very likely not in your fellowships and internships this summer serving as anyone's therapist. So I don't by any means want you to think that in your personal lives or in your work lives, you need to do that. But acknowledging an emotion can really help to keep a conversation on track. And some of this is what we've already been saying. Using sensory words can keep it neutral because I don't know how you feel. I'm not gonna say, you're obviously really upset. But I can say, it seems like you're really going through something here. It seems like you are furious about this. You sound pretty much like you're on your last nerve. Is that right? So if you use those sensory words, you are not putting yourself in someone's shoes. You're not saying you understand their experience. You're just saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing. And that way, if you're wrong, just like with summarizing, they'll tell you. People will be very quick to tell you if you have something wrong. Questions about that? Okay. As far as how to explore an emotion, again, the Venn diagram is pretty overlapping here. So a lot of this is what we've been talking about, but this is when you want to get into that effective questioning. So, if you have recognized that someone is feeling hopeless, this is a moment that you can get some good information, whether this is a partner, a roommate, a boss, a client. What about that makes you feel hopeless? Tell me more about that. How do you feel when you hear this information? What was your reaction to that? You will find sometimes in this profession, people who don't want to talk about their feelings, those are not relevant and they are far outside the scope. You may just want to change your language a little. Instead of how do you feel about that? Something like, what was your reaction to that, right? Attorneys do better with reactions, actions, things that are that have standing and are relevant and are within the scope, absolutely discoverable, right? So anything you can do to do those follow-up questions is going to get you closer to the information that you're ultimately trying to get out of the interaction. Questions about questions? I got to say that twice. So before I give everybody just a minute break before your next speaker, I will mention for those of you who are here in Chicago, CCR, which is not Creedence Clearwater Revival. It took me a solid year before I realized that was not what we were talking about. We have a number of ways to, kind of have our doors open. We do have internships. We have PILI internships. We have externships, often 3-year program. If you have a law clinic with us, which a number of local law schools and master's programs do. If this is something you have any interest in, mediation is becoming much more common because the cost of litigation is wild. So a lot of judges are saying, I'm gonna kick this to mediation before I set a trial date. So having those skills will make you a better attorney and a better advocate and a better roommate, like we talked about. But if you don't have a law school clinic with us, or if you choose to do other things and then don't get around to it, we do also offer trainings. I will say if you can do the law school clinic version, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than doing an a la carte training later, but it's a good skill either way. I've got some business cards up here, and I think in the handouts, we've got email addresses as well. So if your eyes fly open at 3 a.m. and you think, I didn't ask Kate this question and now I won't live with myself, you've got 2 different email addresses. The one that's probably better to go with is the training@ccrchicago.org. That's our general training email, so 3 pairs of eyes will be on that. But you've also got my personal, which is just K Finch. So if you have any questions about PILI, about mediating, about Netflix, or about Twinkle's antibiotic regimen, you can email me there. Any last questions before I let you go? So silent, so silent. Excellent. Well then, thank you so much for letting me come in. I'm really excited that you're kicking off your summer. This is a really great chance to just, network, make some connections, see what you like, and see what isn't your jam. All right, thanks everybody.
No worries. Thank you so much again. I have water this time. I'm not gonna get caught by that ship again, so. Alrighty, so before we begin our next session, I do want to answer a few more questions that have come up, mainly about the advising program. So some of you may have gotten matches, but not all of you have. And the reason that is just it's taken a little bit longer as we got more advisors. There were a lot of you that were very interested in it. And so to cope with that demand, we really had to reach out to our network, which you will soon be a part of, to get people to advise. And so all that means is if you didn't get one yet, you will be getting it next week. We like to have the reception as the first meeting, but it just wasn't in the cards this year, a little bit of issues with timing. So if you haven't gotten an advisor and you requested one, rest assured that is coming soon. If you didn't sign up for the advising program and you think, I think I may want to do that, just come find me. I'll add you to the list and I'll just keep adding you to the matchmaking process. But I did want to clarify that for anyone who may have been concerned that, did I miss the email, or I thought I signed up but I didn't see anything. So it is coming, but yes, if you did change your mind and you want to, just come find me and I can handle that for you. All right, thanks.
I'm so glad.
Which is pretty cool. But so we're trying to think about incorporating those into materials. We have brochures, but brochures seem dated, so it's like.
I've got a friend who works at my gym, and she's like, we do it. I was like, well, I'm looking for this, like, I'm looking for this.
I love QR codes, but they haven't really been used as much, so I don't force them, but it seems like the tides are shifting. I feel like I was an early adopter.
I will be dragged.
I remember they said something, because I was like,
Oh yeah, it's one thing, but
I'm just gonna forget it.
I miss in person so much. Not her as well. The other half of my training experience. So you get to meet her at some point.
I'm sure she can't remember to respond after something.
I know, right?
yes, but it's great meeting you. To grab for the road. Yes, that's right. Really appreciate it.
Oh, they were like a notebook. So many
It's gonna take a few more minutes just for folks to go in.
we'll just like start 2 to 3 minutes.
That's how it goes.
What's going on, Christine? Oh my goodness. Everything is good now that orientation is happening. Everyone's here. It's been great. That's just I was actually together the first time. Because the trip was something that was hearing it's just to be super chill.
Organize your gear gadgets, organize your charger cords. I've heard makeup, though it's not waterproof. Yeah.
I may need you to come back another time, so I won't do that.
You know, I have some my password.
Yeah, we did those. Shows the platform, we had water bottles.
Stop the screen.
They had soda water bottles, so it's like water bottles just about everybody else. Well, thank you again.
It was just be mindful. I think that's what happens when you
Okay, everyone. we are gonna go ahead and get started with our last session of the day, before the reception, where it's fun, food, drink, and all that good stuff. So, without further ado, this is the making the most of your internship and fellowship program, which I feel is the most important one, because no matter if you've done a PILI internship in the past, this is your first time working with a public interest organization, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. There's a lot of culture, there's a lot of little things, and so I think it's good to have the perspective of alums who have been in your shoes, and also supervisors, because if we're being honest, the supervisor is your real important point of contact, and they're the ones who will help you to be successful this summer. And so getting that perspective will really help you have the keys to the castle before you really get that deep into the program. So, grab my questions. And so let me go ahead and do quick intros. I'm gonna have everyone introduce themselves in a little more detail, but just really quick, we have Ruben Batista. We have Sarah Lodi. We have Kathleen Callahan. And we have Corey Biller. They're all friends of PILI. And so I just want to start by going to Ruben. I want you to do a little introduction of yourself, when you were a PILI, where you work now currently, and just a little bit about a memorable moment from your time as a PILI intern.
I think I have to turn this on.
Yes. If the light comes on. Yes, we're good.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ruben Bautista. I graduated from Chicago Kent 2 years ago, I think now. And I was a PILI intern at Equip for Equality after my first year in law school, and also PILI intern at Shriver Center after my second year. And one of the memorable moments I had was at Equip for Equality, had submitted my first writing assignment to one of the staff attorneys, and he pulled me into his office and was just marking it down with red ink. And I think that was the most memorable moment because it helped me so much improve on my legal writing, so I appreciated that.
My name's Sarah Lodi. I graduated Indiana University Mauer in 2019, and I did my PILI fellowship at the John Marshall, now UIC Law School Veteran Center and Clinic. And now I am a fourth year associate, environmental associate at Aaron Fox Schiff here in Chicago. One of my most memorable moments from my PILI fellowship was getting the news back from the Naval Appeals Board that our request for a discharge upgrade for a Navy veteran who was discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell had been upgraded to honorable from dishonorable.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Callahan. I am currently at Carpels. I am a supervising attorney at Carpels. We are Cook County's legal aid hotline, and I supervise the municipal court advice desk. We have been operating on Zoom virtually for about 1.5 years, and we're now dipping our toes back into being in person at the Daily Center. So that has been an interesting experience so far. I was a PILI intern for what is now known as Legal Aid Chicago. At that point, it was known as the Legal Aid Foundation, and it was in Evanston. They no longer have the Evanston office. And my memorable experience was being thrown into things in the deep end. And, well, I shouldn't say in the deep end. I always had a lot of support, but I handled an appeal of an unemployment case, and we won that case. I also handled a Social Security hearing, so I just found it fascinating, and I really found my niche working in legal aid. I found my purpose for my legal career. So that it really made an impression on me. So that's where I come from. And I also supervise PILI interns right now, PILI interns and fellows who come to Carpels for their internship or fellowship.
All right, I'm Corey Biller. I'm currently in-house employment counsel at ConAgra.
I was a PILI intern after my first summer in law school, which was WashU, I forgot that part, at Lambda Legal. And one of the best moment was a party. So I was actually there the summer that marriage equality went through, the Obergefell case was heard and decided. So we had a huge party to celebrate with the city, and it was amazing. We had the mayor there, we had all these different council people, and it was just like, we were there very late, and I was not feeling good the next day, but the pictures were amazing and the experience was amazing.
No, that's a real good memorable moment. I can only imagine how chill of a party that was. Yes. I would like to start with Kathleen, and just as a supervisor, what are the most important expectations that you have for your interns and fellows, and kind of what do you think is one of the initial pitfalls that you see a lot of them stumble with in the very beginnings of their tenure?
I don't know that I really see pitfalls. I do want to see kind of an energy and an openness to the work. You probably, if you were like me, I was new to working in poverty law. And when you work for a lot of legal aid organizations, you're working with people who live in poverty. And I would like to, I look for an openness, and that has never been an issue. I also look for enthusiasm to learn about the organization, to learn about all the different things that our legal aid organization does. And also to be enthusiastic and be open to helping us out. There's one thing that I never like, which is somebody who sits there waiting for somebody to say, oh, do you need something to do? In my opinion, if you don't have anything to do, go to your supervisor and say, hey, is there something I can do? That's probably one of the biggest pitfalls that I can see. If we look really busy, we're always going to look busy. Your supervisor is always going to look busy for the most part. So always come up to us and say, hey, how can I help? Is there something I can do? Usually you're not going to run into a problem like that at a legal aid organization, but I think that's something that's important for me.
Thank you. And then I will go to the other three members of the panel. I'll start with you, Corey, and we'll work our way backward. So what do you think would be a good thing an intern or fellow can do to start off on the right foot from your experience? And if you ran into anything that maybe was a challenge at the beginning of your internship, feel free to share and offer a little bit of kind of how you overcame it.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the best things you can do is introduce yourself to the people that you're working with. Ask them about their backgrounds, find out what work they love doing, so you can start to find maybe some of your interest in those people that you're working with and for. I think it also builds connections, and I still talk to my supervisor from Lambda Legal. He's no longer there, but he's still in the Chicago area. He's still involved with PILI, as am I. So those relationships are typically not just for this one summer. And in terms of a pitfall, I had my internship after my first year of law school, and I had no prior experience working in anything legal. So one of the challenges I found was, you're thrown into things that you've never learned about, right? And maybe you're never going to practice. I mean, there are things I did at Lambda Legal that I don't currently do in my private practice. And it's a little bit overwhelming, and at least for me, my inclination was just to try to figure it out and just get through it. And I didn't want to ask questions because I felt like maybe that would make me look stupid, that this is something I should know. But I had to overcome that quickly when I would hit roadblocks and really didn't know what to do. So asking questions and not being afraid to ask those questions, because it can be a little bit intimidating. You might think that you should know what to do, but no one knows what to do, even when you graduate law school. When you get into the practical legal practice, very different. So your supervisors are there. They want to help you grow. They want to help you learn. Ask those questions. Don't be afraid. They know you're coming at this with probably no experience in that particular field.
Yeah, my challenge was very similar to Corey's. It was knowledge of the law that I was practicing, Veterans law is not something I did in law school, and it's pretty vast, especially all the way from the administrative system to the Veterans Court of Appeals and higher. And so that was definitely a challenge jumping into my fellowship. But I think the thing that I would suggest that everybody do is like take ownership of whatever cases or matters or clients that you guys have. And that means, just like Corey said, asking the questions that you don't know. But also, if you have an idea, giving those ideas to your supervisors. You will more intimately likely know those cases than your supervisor, and you're gonna get one of two responses, like, oh, I don't think that's gonna work because of X, Y, Z, and now you've learned something, or that's a brilliant idea, I had never thought of that, let's try it. Nobody's ever gonna look at you and be like, that was stupid, and just move past it. So if you've got an idea, if you're looking at the case and you see an avenue that may be beneficial for your client, suggest it. It could be helpful, or you could learn something. Either way, take ownership of those matters, and that's how you're gonna get the most from that experience.
Please forgive me if I mentioned this in my introduction, but now I'm a staff attorney at Equifer Quality, a very important fact that I just had to mention. So I think two of the most valuable lessons that I learned in my PILI internships was first, make sure that you're taking the assignments that you're able to handle at that moment and not overcommit to some projects that you're not able to complete within the deadline given to you by your supervisor. I think it's important to put in all your effort to the assignments that you're receiving, and if you need more, of course, you should ask for more assignments to come to you during your internship. And the second one is related to assignments that are given to you. If you don't understand the assignment or have questions regarding your assignment, make sure that you're reaching out to the attorney that's assigning you the project, because it's important that you're not just working on that assignment and it turn in something completely different to what a supervisor or to the attorney wanted from you as a work product. So just making sure that you have a clear understanding of what the end goal and then work product that you're submitting. There's two of the most important lessons that I learned very early on and throughout my PILI internships.
Absolutely, and we can use the skills we learned from Kate to make sure we ask good questions to our supervisors, reflect, and all of that good stuff, which I will say has helped me immensely, repeating things back and even following up with an email saying like, hey, to summarize the conversation we had before, because supervisors are busy. They may have omitted a detail that they assumed was important, that everyone knew, but you gotta realize you're new. So if you don't know, ask the question. So on that note, I will say that we talked a lot about sort of those matters that could be sensitive throughout the day, but also a lot of the organizations we work with, we're dealing with people who are, they're having trouble. No one really goes to a lawyer when everything's going great. So what would be some good tips or advice for interns and fellows dealing with these potentially sensitive matters? Not only just how to respect confidentiality, but sort of how do you not take those things home from work with you, because some of those things can really weigh on us. I'll start with you, Ruben. We'll just go to work our way back down.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have activities and avenues for you to be able to disconnect from the work that you're doing. And the work that we all do is going to be super important and really valuable for our clients, but it's also important for us to make sure that we're healthy both physically and mentally in order to be able to be the best advocates for our clients. So making sure that you all have those avenues to be able to decompress after your work period.
Yeah, I would suggest two things. The first one is if you have a supervisor or a coworker or a fellow intern. I was the only PILI fellow or intern at my clinic, so I just had my supervisors who I stay in touch with, and they're awesome. If something has really weighed on you heavily, don't go home and talk to your partner or your friend about it because of confidentiality concerns, but you can always talk to your supervisor or coworker to be like, hey, how do you handle this? Because if they're not a PILI intern or fellow, they've been at this even if it's only 3 months longer than you, they have those experiences. The other thing I would suggest is what you can do with the people who are outside of your workplace. Be like, hey, I had a really hard day at work. Can we go get coffee? And talk about something else. I found that to be really, really relieving for me in not even focusing on what happened during the day, but having those outside interests, those extra support systems in dealing with like the tougher days. And for your clients who are admittedly having a much harder time with these things than you are, try to give them grace and space. We had a client at the Veterans Clinic who called almost every day about her benefits, and the supervisor was like, she calls every day, and just let them talk, because sometimes they just need to. You are their outlet in some cases, and so you need your own, but also respect that they are dealing with some pretty difficult things.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you just said. I think that for what we do at Kerbals, we're talking to people either mostly on our legal aid hotline, so on the phone or on Zoom and sometimes in person. And these are people in crisis. We're dealing with people in crisis. And I think to listen to them with an openness and be non-judgmental about it. Because I think what took me a while to understand is when somebody is living in poverty and they have so many stressors in their life, it's hard to make good decisions sometimes. But sometimes they have no decision. It's either they pay for their children's food or they pay rent and they're gonna feed their children over paying rent. And so they're just in very difficult circumstances. And as much as you can deal with somebody in a kind and non-judgmental way, I think you can get so much more out of it. And if they lash out at you, I usually try and say, please don't raise your voice. But if somebody, I think on the other hand, you also, what I have had to tell people is when somebody crosses the line and curses at you or does these things, and it's, doesn't happen very often, but it may happen, then that's when you can say, I'm sorry, I need to speak with my supervisor. And I think it's really important when you have a very tough conversation, when you have a tough interaction, first of all, have your limits. Be kind, be open, but have your limits. And when you have an especially difficult interaction, tell your supervisor and take a mental health break. That's really important. That's part of my job as a supervisor. There are times when we have to say, okay, take a break, go walk around the block, whatever, and come back when you have a clear mind. So I think, on the other hand, I've worked in private practice, and working with this, it just is so gratifying. People I have found that people are very, very grateful for the work that you're doing for them. They are very grateful. They can be very frustrated with our very frustrating legal system, absolutely, but they're generally very grateful for your help. So I hope you guys get a lot out of it, because I think you can get so much out of this work. It's such important and meaningful work.
Yeah, I think I'll echo a lot of what's been said. In terms of how to approach those conversations, I think the biggest thing for me was just, they're human beings, right? You're a human being, they're a human being, approaching it at that level. And then we've already mentioned confidentiality, so I won't go over that, but what I will say is be careful though not to overpromise or make guarantees that you can't keep that promise, you can't keep that guarantee, or potentially delving into legal advice, because sometimes, if you don't know the answer, that's perfectly acceptable, and it's okay to say that, and it's okay to just take a beat. At that point, you're really just getting facts, you're learning about what's going on, so it can be tempting because you want to help solve the problem. But a lot of the time, at least my experience was, I didn't know how to solve the problem, right? And I certainly couldn't guarantee that we could solve the problem. we also had a hotline, so a lot of the calls that came in, didn't result in cases that we could take, you just don't have the capacity. So just keep that in mind, and as Sarah mentioned, a lot of the people who call into the organizations or walk in and have appointments, there's a lot of help that can be done just to listening to their situation, right? Just to being another human being, hearing about what's going on and being empathetic. And then in terms of how to, if something is, you have one of these conversations is especially tough. I did have the great experience of being one of 3 interns that summer at Lambda Legal, so that was phenomenal, right? The 3 of us, there were no confidentiality concerns. We could kind of share what our conversations were like, what the legal issues we were seeing, and that kind of debriefing just as colleagues and as friends was great. So I never felt like I had no one to talk to, with that outlet was phenomenal, just both to build friendships and great connections, but also to have that de-stress built in right there with me.
Well, that's a really good point, and it kind of leads me into my next point about the inevitable mistakes. I did them, we've all done them, we all got way more to do. So the question is, and I'll start with you, Ruben, we'll work our way back down, sort of, what's the best way to handle a mistake that you've made or that you've noticed? And also, how do you think you've learned from some of the more common mistakes and how it's helped your career going forward?
I mean, I've made so many mistakes. And I would just say that the key is to realize that you've made a mistake, and the way that I've done it is to immediately talk to my colleague or my supervisor to make sure that they're aware of what's going on related to a matter, and there's always going to be a solution, so don't freak out. That's just one tip, right? And in regards to like improving from those mistakes, I think just reevaluating of where I went wrong or what did I do wrong, and making sure that in other situations that are similar to that, I'm not making those same mistakes.
Yeah, I think I have a feeling all the advice here is going to be very similar, which is own it and don't hide it. Don't try to fix it on your own in fear that you may have some sort of potential reprimand from your supervisor. It is always better to catch it first than to try and fix it and then find out about it. And there may be solutions that you haven't thought of because you haven't been in that position before, but everybody makes mistakes, and it's very likely that the mistake that you have made has been made before. So talk to somebody, own it. You can present potential solutions if you can think about them, but owning it and bringing it to the attention of others as soon as possible so that it can be corrected is definitely the number one way to handle it. And a very, very specific example is I now check who I reply all the time. And I think almost every attorney, I would say all, has made that mistake. Clicked reply all when you're supposed to just reply to one person. So it's little mistakes, it's big mistakes, just own it. Come up with a solution with your supervisor and then move forward from it.
Yeah, as a supervisor of any PILI, I'm not gonna blame you guys for making a mistake. It's generally gonna be my fault because I wasn't supervising you well enough. So I'm not, I would find it hard to believe, at least at Purple's, we never the PILI made a mistake. Well, everybody makes a mistake every single day. I make mistakes. And in the legal field, you're gonna make mistakes. It's rarely one that is a very, is something that is going to be very costly for the client. So I think how maybe you work from the beginning is you know what you don't know. And at the beginning, you're not gonna know a whole lot. So ask a lot of questions. We're always open to questions. And then when we give you feedback, so for instance, at Carpel's, we case review everything you do. Every case note that you put in, we're gonna give you a note, we're gonna give you feedback. Now, if we take time to give you feedback, because that's time consuming, I want you guys to absorb that feedback though. I want you to try to learn from it, and if you have questions, come and ask us. that is really when I know, oh, they got it. This is somebody really good because they're following up on my feedback and they're learning from it. So that is I think the most important part, is trying to learn from, I just don't think there are really big, I mean, yeah, you're gonna make mistakes, but again, it's part of your training and it's part of our responsibilities as supervisors to properly train you and to also educate you. So I really, to me, it's not a shortcoming on your part. It might be a shortcoming from the part of your supervisors.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing everyone has mentioned, just owning it, being mature about it, coming forward and being honest about it. And the other side of that is don't let a mistake destroy you, destroy your day. Mistakes happen. Even the most senior attorneys you're working with have made mistakes, continue to make mistakes. And so if you have a mistake and it's brought to your attention, or you have to bring it to someone's attention, it may not be your favorite conversation. It's not fun, but you have to move forward from it, right? You have to learn from it what you can, but also let it go. Tomorrow's another day and you have another matter, you'll have another chance to not make a mistake. So that's really hard, I think, especially not in my PILI internship, everyone's really nice. They're happy to have you, they're happy to teach, but starting out in law firms especially, it was really tough for me to move on from mistakes early in my career. And so that's what I would advise you, move forward. If you need to take a walk, or if even you need to take an afternoon, right? That's okay. But don't let it then color everything else that you do.
Absolutely, that's a great point, because the same way you practice self-care dealing with sensitive matters, you practice self-care when dealing with mistakes, because again, you've maybe made them before. Some of you were fortunate enough to have never gotten caught making a mistake at any sort of professional position, but your days are numbered. It's just because this, they call it, I remember an elder attorney saying that this is called the practice of law, because you never really get it. Like, there's always something new that's coming. You get familiar with certain things, but you'll never have it all down 100%. And even the folks you think do, they're just resourceful. And that's just kind of the key to everything. Let's see. You guys have answered a lot of the questions I had on here through your responses, which is great. It's gonna leave us more time for questions from the audience, but now it just means I gotta kind of sort through and let's see what would be a good, oh, this is a good one here. What's the best way to end the internship and fellowship in such a way where you can stay in contact with your supervisors and sort of maintain that networking relationship? Funny enough, I'm going to start with you, Ruben, because I think you probably have a great perspective on this one. So I'll let you go ahead and get started on that one.
All right. Well, I must say I was really fortunate to work at two really great organizations with great people that were really invested in making sure that folks that were going through the internship or fellowship experience were receiving like mentorship throughout the summer, and then staying in contact afterwards. Those mentorships continued, and I mean they just become really go-to folks who I've been able to reach out to whenever I was nearing graduation and thinking about my next steps and what that looks like. And like just a huge shout out to one of my colleagues now at Equip, who was my mentor during my summer year after my first year. And it was like, I stayed in contact with her and was really interested in coming back to the organization and working on disability and civil rights. And luckily for me, a position had opened up and I applied, and here I am doing my dream job.
So maintaining relationships after a fellowship looks a little different because you go into the fellowship knowing that at the end of the fellowship, you're going to take the bar and you're going to join the law firm that sponsored your fellowship. That being said, I think a great way to end your internship or fellowship is make sure all your cases are taken care of, whether that means wrapped up or summarized or whatever your organization wants you doing with those, that they can either be passed off to somebody else, filed away, making sure all of those things are buttoned up, and then staying in contact with people. I still talk to my supervisors from the Veterans Clinic at least once a year. I see them at events, I see them at the PILI events, I see them, we get lunch, and we've maintained that relationship despite the fact that I'm now in practice for 4 years. And I think that's just a matter of everything that accumulates over your summer or your time as an intern or fellow, all of the work you put in, all of the effort, care, openness that you've decided to invest into the thing that they have chosen to do with their life, and then making sure that you do a good job of wrapping everything up so that you don't leave and then your supervisors are like, oh my God, what do I do with all these cases now? Leaving on a good note with your workload will also inform your relationship after you leave your internship or fellowship.
So I think I'm gonna echo everything that has already been said, but I think also, keeping strong ties is about keeping in touch with your supervisors and with your coworkers and maybe with the friends from PILI that you've made as well. Keeping involved in PILI, I think, is really important. As PILIs, you guys are gonna get invited to all of the legal aid provider organizations events, especially if you go to a big firm. We're gonna say, oh, we know you're making some money, so just be prepared for that. But yeah, I love hearing from former interns. I love to see that they're doing really well. I stayed very close with my supervisor from Legal Aid Chicago for years and years. He helped me get back into legal aid when I first got out of law school many years ago. I did go to DePaul, I went here. I think I forgot to mention that. But I couldn't get a job in legal aid. There weren't enough jobs. And I had been working in private practice and I wanted to get back in. I met with a couple of my supervisors. They said, hey, I think the Chicago Legal Clinic is looking for someone, and they hooked me up. And I got back into legal aid in 1999 and have pretty much stayed in legal aid since then. So I would say you'll find also in legal aid organizations that many, many, many of us, once we stay in legal aid. We might have worked for different organizations, and we're all gonna have different perspectives. So I think, like you said, keeping in touch, and also now it's a little bit easier to keep in touch too with social media, LinkedIn, all of that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I interned here at Lambda Legal after my first year, and then I had 2 more years in St. Louis. So I had to be really deliberate about keeping in touch. I'm not, I wasn't in Chicago to go to these events I was invited, they looked great, but wrong city for me at the time. So I just took practical steps. I mean, we were leaving, make sure to connect on LinkedIn, make sure you have everyone's email in case it's not, listed. And then I just was deliberate, right? It's awkward sometimes, but I would find oh, here's an interesting case, or maybe it tied into something I was doing in the summer. And I would just contact my supervisor hey, how are you doing? And or if I was gonna be in Chicago. So something to make a conversation, but just having those touch points. And then on that note, having those sort of just checking in, how are you, being a person and having a nice friendship made it easier when I had asks, right? So your supervisor, no matter what you want to do, whether you want to end up in that organization, other public aid organization, or private practice, all of the people you're working with have connections and they want to help you. So maintaining that just casual, nice checking in every so often made it easier when I said, hey, I want to come back to Chicago and I want to be in employment law. Do you know anyone? And my supervisor was more than happy to make connections. He had been in private practice before coming to Lambda Legal. So don't be afraid to make those asks, make them soft, right? You don't want to back someone into the corner if they don't know someone or they really just don't have that connection for you or don't have the time. But so as long as you make those soft asks, people are really going to try to help you. And if they don't know someone, they'll try to connect you to someone else. So keeping that line of communication is helpful so that when you do have that awkward thing of, hey, I need to find a job or I want to move cities or whatever it is, you can make that other ask for help a little easier.
And do you mind if I
please
pipe in? So I think one really important point that I do want to make clear to you guys is that more than at any other time I can think of in my pretty long career now, there are a lot of legal aid job openings. So this year, we're gonna be like, maybe this person might be good. That has not been the case in many years. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. If this is something that, if you're a PILI intern and this is something you are thinking of doing long-term, keep that in the back of your mind. You're gonna be, we're gonna be determining, hey, is this somebody who we wanna see back once you guys are out of law school?
I'm just curious, who's a PILI intern, who's a fellow? PILI fellows?
Let's start with the fellows. And now interns.
I appreciate it, just curious.
So about half and half?
So yeah, it's always, we always end up getting more interns and fellows, but it's always kind of cool. I've been staring at the roster of y'all for probably the last few months, so I feel like I've memorized some of your names and just from frequency of seeing it, but yeah, it's still really cool to see y'all, and yeah, the interns and fellows are kind of what excited me for this job, so I can just say that I'm super pumped to see y'all here again. I probably said like 5 times today. On that note, the Chicago legal community is tiny. It doesn't seem that way when we think of the size of the city of Chicago, but it is quite tiny. So how has your experience being involved with PILI really helped you to connect with the Chicago network? I'll start with you, Corey, and we'll just kind of cruise back down this way for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's changed, right, throughout my career. As I mentioned, I did ask my supervisor if he had connections in the field I was looking at, and I had asked, another point I'll say, I had asked for some employment-focused work while I was at my internship because I knew that was what I wanted to do. So I would encourage you to do that. I know that wasn't the question asked of me, but if there's something that you are interested in, whether it's you came in being interested in it, or maybe someone else was doing something interesting that you would have liked to do, ask. A lot of times there's a way for you to get involved and to get that experience that you're looking for. So that's how it started, and then I've maintained my relationship with PILI through serving on the Young Professionals Board, which I'm still on, and that has been awesome, right? It's a collection of people that I didn't know before that are all connected with PILI, all in similar-ish years of our careers. It's been an incredible network because now I know all these people in different firms, organizations all over Chicago that I didn't know before. We're all united from our experiences with PILI, and you'll find too, if you're a firm, there's a lot of people who are PILI interns or fellows or who worked for an organization through PILI. So it's a really large organization, and then the connections you can make from it, you just have to put in that effort. But I found it to be very rewarding and a wonderful part of my practice and just as being a person in Chicago,
Yeah, I think it is. I come to every PILI event, and first of all, it's really nice to be back in person because even last year we were remote for the most part. I think I only met my PILI advisee on Zoom. We tried to make it happen in person, but she was working remotely too. So, and I think out of state. So now is a great opportunity for us all to see each other again. There's a lot more networking that we can do. I quite often come to these PILI events, and part of what CARPLS does, in case CARPLS is the Coordinated Advice and Referral Program to Legal Services, or Cook County's Legal Aid Hotline. But part of our job is to know who to refer people to. Not only are we the ER sort of legal aid saying, okay, let me give you some legal advice about your problem, and then we'll refer you on if you need more intense representation. So part of my job is knowing what everybody else does, but it's quite often at these events that I see somebody from Shriver Center or from Center for Disability and Elder Law, and I'll say, you guys are doing that now? I didn't know that. So it's very interesting. It's great to see all the different things that people are doing. So it really does key me in even more to the pulse of what's happening in legal aid and all the great work that's being done.
As slightly foreshadowed by Kathleen, my experience networking with PILI has been small because I started my practice about less than a year before, March 2020. And everybody went work from home and everybody left the city. I was a fellow rep on our alumni board, and that was a great experience, although completely virtual. And I still stay in contact with my advisor from my fellowship, which I encourage you all to do the same. He works at a firm in the city, been invited to his firm. It's been amazing. It's been a great networking experience in, the 6 months before we went home back from COVID and, the last 6 months to a year since we've been back. But the network is amazing. I attend all the events I can. It's great to just get to know people. And like Corey said, as soon as people in the firm found out it was a PILI, I had just people coming out of the woodwork. Like, I was a PILI in 1989, and telling me about their experience. And so I was able to network within my firm as a young associate in the same way that you can network in the legal community as well.
Yeah, so everyone just took all the thoughts away from me. I have much to share, but PILI's a great organization. I was one of the experiences that I had was getting partnered up during my EQUIP internship with an IP attorney who I've never really, as a first generation, I wasn't really familiar with the vast areas of law that there were out there, and it was a really great opportunity to learn about IP and also get to meet some of the attorneys at my mentors' law firms, and still stay in contact with the law firm and also the vast majority of attorneys that work there. After graduating, I was also part of the student member of the board, where I got to meet a lot of folks that were practicing different types of law. And you run into folks, regardless of whether they practice public interest law or other types of law outside of PILI, but they're always familiar of the work that PILI is doing. And if you mentioned that you were a PILI intern or fellow, they will recognize that and really offer a hand to help you navigate the legal field.
And I just want to piggyback on your point, Ruben. It is great because my mentor, at that point I was going in to be a transactional attorney at my firm. My mentor, I can't remember, I think they maybe did appellate litigation. And so it seems like two things that had nothing in common, but the network is so vast. They knew that, hey, I can give you general advice about what it means to be a young associate, what it means to be an attorney, but instrumental in introducing me to so many other people that they knew. So we know you guys put your requests on there and we try the best to match with that, but you'd be surprised at something that doesn't seem like, oh, why is this person connected with me? But you'll find out that it's a valuable experience. And with this tiny legal community here in Chicago, it ends up being a really good experience. So I also stayed in contact with my advisor, so I recommend that to everyone. So we have about 10 minutes left. And so what I want to do now is sort of get a parting thought, a little pithy piece of advice for everyone going forward. Sarah, I'm going to pick on you first, and I want you to kind of speak to your experience as a fellow, balancing it all, the fellowship, the and everything else around it. Just please reassure folks that they can do it. I did it, Sarah did it. Go ahead and give a little thought on that one.
When I was a fellow, PILI had an 100% success rate at the bar. I don't know if that's still true. Is it still true?
I couldn't tell you. I've only been here 2.5 months.
But you're gonna pass, and I will say my fellowship kept me sane. I had friends who stayed in Bloomington, Indiana, and studied in our journal office the whole summer, and by the middle of July, beginning of July, they were like, I'm so burnt out, I can't even look at another bar book. I never had that experience because I was getting out of my house, I was doing work that I was passionate about, I was getting experience, then I was coming back and studying things that were mundane, like trusts and estates. So it did keep me sane. You can balance it, you can do it. I think I had like a few hours after the bar exam that I went back for a week and finished up. So I was done by September. I still got my bar trip. It was fun. I passed. First try. You guys all will too. You can do it. And it'll keep you sane, I swear.
All right, Kathleen, I'll go next, go to Corey, then I'll circle back around to you, Ruben.
I don't have anything pithy to say. But I think just, try to get the most out of it. I think you can get so much out of it, and I really hope you find this work rewarding. I certainly did, and that's why I pretty much stayed in it. One thing that I do want to let you know, if you have an advisor, really tap into your advisor. One of the most important things I did as an advisor for my PILI advisee, she was at an organization, I think they were just so busy, she wasn't getting enough work to do. And she kind of didn't know how to handle that. And she had talked to the supervisor, she wasn't getting anywhere. I got in touch with PILI. And PILI was great. And from then on, things were pretty much smooth sailing. So that is something too, because you know what? It can be awkward. It can be awkward to go to your supervisor who you know is super busy. And if they seem super busy and they're not paying attention, and hopefully that's not your experience, but tap into your advisor, okay? So they will give you some ideas. But yeah, just, enjoy your time, hopefully, and we're really happy to have you working with us from a legal aid veterans point of view. We are very happy to have you guys, and we really hope you get the most out of your experience.
Yeah, I guess I would say learn everything you can, be a sponge, absorb, ask for things that you want to learn. Again, you'd be surprised making that request, letting people know you're interested in something, a certain field, writing a motion, or whatever it is. Like, I guarantee you there's some way to get you that experience. And I would echo what Kathleen said, have fun. I did this after my first year of law school, which was not my favorite year of all time. Law school is weird and competitive, and you're fighting for your grades and forced curves. And this was such a breath of fresh air for me. Like, it just really renewed my spirit of like, oh, there's some really wonderful people who practice law. There's a lot of different ways to practice law, so many different areas. And it's not, that competitive nature, trying to be the best, really shouldn't be your focus. You want to do a good job, but really it should be learning and having fun and learning more about what you think you want to do, helping you direct, your interests, your career, because it really is. And for me, even though I didn't go the route, I did a lot of constitutional law, I still think about those cases, right? I still have connections from the internship. And again, it was just, I let myself kind of get out of that law school bubble and really just embrace, like, they're happy to have me, I'm happy to be here. Let's learn everything I can and enjoy my summer too. So that worked for me. I recommend the de-stressing and enjoyment.
Yes.
I just echo everything that was said in the panel. No, I think it's just a really valuable experience that you all have, and are about to embark on, and really use every single assignment that you get and learn from every single assignment, because it's important work that you all are doing to help support our clients that we're working with. So thank you.
Okay, and so with the last few minutes, I'll just open it up to questions. It's okay if you don't have any. Will any of you be sticking around for the reception?
Oh, we
We have a question. Oh,
I was just gonna ask, I didn't see their names and information in the packet, so I was just wondering if there's a way that we can connect with them.
sure. I have all of y'all's contact info. If you're okay with me sharing it with the crowd, I can do so. Yes, so what I'll do is afterward, I will send a summary of the day. I'm going to send you any handouts that I got, any people's contact info, and I'll go ahead and make sure that you guys all get it, because this is building your public interest network, and these folks are really good, and I'm thrilled to have y'all come here as well. And so, yeah, that's why we pick the people who do to come back, because they always have great advice.
Socratic method.
No, I can't. Even if I were a professor, I couldn't do it. I'd let people know, like, hey, you up to date, because I got caught out a few times. It was my fault, but at the same time, it's never a good feeling when everyone's looking at you and you're like, ah. But yes, so let's go ahead and give a round of applause to our team. And so, y'all survived orientation. Give yourselves a round of applause, even y'all in Zoom. This is an exciting time. There's a lot of anticipation. Even if you have started, there's still a little bit to like what's gonna happen the rest of your summer. My fellows, I know Barbie's probably already started. At the same time, do what you can, don't burn yourself out. But before we head off to the fun reception, remember those. Remember the surveys I talked about in your folders. Everyone get your surveys out. We need your feedback. I don't need you to take an hour to do so, but really just let us know what you enjoyed about the day, any other topics that we may want to add in the future. We really value your feedback and it's super important. Thank you.